is that so terrible to just say you can disagree with him, but we respect the fact that he contributed a lot to a lot of different leaders in this country?
I don't think that would be a terrible way to talk about a deceased person who you disagreed with about what the top marginal tax rate should be. But in this case, what you're talking about disagreements about are real serious war crimes, crimes against humanity. During the final decades of his life, there was a list of countries that Dr. Kissinger could not visit because he was wanted for question by authorities there, including close U.S. allies in Western Europe. Like a Spanish judge, for example, issued a warrant for him in connection with the disappearance of Spanish citizens under Pinochet's reign of terror after Kissinger helped to remove the democratically elected president, Salvador Allende. If we're talking about things like Kissinger's notorious instructions to his deputy Alexander Haig for the bombing of Cambodia that killed 150,000 civilians, anything that flies on anything that moves, I would say we're not talking about the realm of normal political disagreements. We're talking about things.
Let me give Sumantra a chance to respond.
Truly criminal and monstrous. But I did just want to say.
Hang on, I'm almost out of time.
Yeah. So I am joined, of course, by Jake and Andy, and also by Mark, who is a new character in the GTA Extended Universe. Do you want to introduce yourself, Mark?
Sure. Hi, I'm Mark. I play in a band called Team Driver. I hate Henry Kissinger and was very happy to see him go. And really happy to be here to piss on Kissinger. Yeah. So this was kind of funny. You know, I'd written a bunch about Kissinger and the last years of his life, and so when he died, I remember that night. So like that was the News Nation spot. Was like the next day they brought me in to argue with that guy for the American Conservative about Kissinger. But like that night, when his death was announced, I think I had like 4 friends who called me on the phone to be like, because they wanted to like share the news because they thought I'd be excited to hear that Kissinger was dead. Champagne bottles all around the world.
The thing, the Gore Fidel thing is in. So Vidal's in Rome, and is it some like I don't know. If I knew more about visual art, I'd be better able to convey. But like whatever, is it some classic like Renaissance painting of hell, right? Like and he sees this like Henry Kissinger in front of him looking at the painting, and so Vidal supposedly turns to the person next to him and says, "Oh, look, he's apartment hunting."
Yeah. Well, it's horrid. It's just horrid that he's another one who got to live a long life, like many decades of just scorn from much of the world and any free thinking person. But he died in comfort, probably surrounded with family and and with the best regards from many heads of state. It's just an abomination, really. But at least we did get that tiny little nugget,
Yeah, I mean he lived to be 100, which really feels like a deal with the devil kind of scenario. But okay. Well, so the reason we are talking about Henry Kissinger, a touch over a year after his death, is that when Andy talked about having you on the show, he mentioned that you guys have a song about him, which I believe we've got. Jake, what have we got here?
Well, we have a little live clip, and then we'll listen to a studio version afterward.
Awesome. Jake, do we have the Bandcamp?
Oh yeah, I'm actually gonna it will be the same thing on SoundCloud, right? I'm gonna share or is it not?
Yes, it would be the same one. Yep.
Yeah, because on Bandcamp, I mean that would maybe go with the spirit of the song, but I don't think I could control the volume on Bandcamp.
Oh, okay.
I think it's kind of we're gonna someone who fell asleep during the main show is gonna gonna wake up, which will be fun.
Fuck yeah. I remember after I saw y'all play at your CD, your EP release party. I was talking to Riley, the synth player, and I'm like, that song reminded me of Black Sabbath, which you can kind of hear a little bit of that in there. Which is very cool.
Yeah, I mean, like, I mean, also a band that has some good kind of politically motivated songs. A band. I think every band at that time too was like looking at, like, at least out of England, the U.S. is like looking at Vietnam and things, social unrest in their times. But it was the easiest song in the world to write. Very straightforward. There's not much mystery.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that's like the sort of most amazing is like how well well documented all that stuff is, how just like unambiguous, right, it is, right, that there's so much fuckery that happens around the world where it's like sort of easy to say like, oh, did I don't know, did the United States kill like 500,000 kids in Iraq with sanctions in the 90s? Like, okay, but like the goal wasn't to do that. It was it was the sanctions were on dual use technology, and so sure, that meant they couldn't like rebuild any water purification plants after the war, but blah blah blah. Like there's a sort of like, it's I think it's very easy to get kind of lost in the weeds arguing about that, even though I think there is like this really clear moral point there, right? Like it's still like it's still sort of there's a way in which like the apologist job is a little bit easier there, right? Whereas like fucking Kissinger, I mean, like this is like the like half the stuff you're talking about in that song. I mean, you can find some like so witty quote from him about why they did it, like,
right. Well, and it's almost like like I sing the second verse, Riley sings the first one, and his was even more poetic about blood from the jungle floor. But I was like, how do I do this? Statistics, like numbers, almost completely like kind of paint the picture. Not to mention just like the hideousness, like the physical grotesqueness of the man, but that's shallow. But like,
but you do kind of feel like there's something there, right? It's like this is like almost like a kind of like fairy tale rules, right? Like that this is this sort of such a physically grotesque manifestation of what's going on in his soul.
For sure, yeah. I mean, like one could hope that perhaps he wouldn't never rested easy, although like one wonders, but there's a lot of folks that are we'll probably see like live to 100 who are absolute criminals. We could name any number of presidents or governments of the United States or whatever, but like
Netanyahu I think is going to live to 100.
Right.
How
old is Netanyahu now? I mean, he's not young.
No,
he's up there. Yeah,
I mean, he was
like the evil juice.
His prime minister was like more than 30 years ago, and like he wasn't young then.
Right.
Yeah, he's 75. Still 25 years of.
25 years to get the Kissinger. The Kissinger. Party, yeah.
Still grotesque when you consider, against all of the lives that were cut short because of what he's doing, I mean, Kissinger and
well, it's not just like Kissinger was like sitting at home, just I don't know, going to like get the early bird special at Denny's and and just like living a normal old person life. I mean, it's he was like until pretty close to the bitter end, and I'm pretty sure it only ended because like he was physically not up to it anymore, right? Like he was like being invited onto cable news to like sound off about what international crisis was going on in the world at that time. It's like, oh, who do we want to hear about Ukraine or this or that? It's like, oh, well, our sage elder statesman, Dr. Kissinger will, come on with his, with his Dr. Strangelove accent and, give us, give us his foreign affairs insights. It's like, and it's like, no, this is like, this is literally the guy who, it's not just like, it's bad enough if you have, of course, American, presidents, other secretaries of state, who are supporting, sort of knowingly giving financial and military assistance to people who are, committing all kinds of horrors. You think about like Reagan and like the, Reagan supporting, the Mujahideen and Saddam Hussein and all those people, right? But like, this is like a guy who's like very hands-on, right? This is like he's like giving Haig the instructions on the targeting in Cambodia, and he's and like in Chile, right? He's like specifically like, oh yeah, this like if you read like Christopher Hitchens' book on Kissinger, he's quoting transcripts, which they kept for some reason is like kind of beyond me, right? Why that stuff wasn't destroyed, right? But like, transcripts of meetings where they're talking like this before the coup, right? About this like Chilean general who it's like, oh, he wouldn't go along with it. Yeah, you probably need to get rid of that guy, right? It's like, what are we going to do about him? And then like the next week he's kidnapped. It's so this is, and yeah, disappearance of journalists and dissidents and in different countries. It's just the level of unabashedness of evil is kind of kind of through the roof, right? And you don't get the sense that to your point about like how it's like, oh, you hope he didn't at least rest easy. And I was thinking about it, right? You started mentioning presidents, all that's like, okay. So there's like George W. Bush, who maybe does have, I don't think much of one, right? But like there might be some kind of dull flickerings of guilt going on there, right? Like there was famously there was that speech that Bush gave where he's talking like he means to say the illegal, unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine, but he says Iraq.
Oh, that's right. I do remember that slip. Yeah, right.
And I love the fact that he's just like, oh, like,
oh no, sorry.
Yeah, he's aware of that. Yeah, the Bush era. I guess that was because I'm like 44. I kind of grew up protesting the Iraq War and like radicalized the late 90s even, but like kind of like around then. And just to see that like we just kind of moved on, or like that all those people are kind of still there, or many of them, all the pundits that sold the war, like all those, there was no reckoning for that catastrophe, and among many others. But like, it's tough. It can be tough to swallow sometimes, I guess, because you'd love to see at least something, But,
totally right. It's like the Iraq War. So there's this book that's, I guess it's coming out next month. I just looked it up, but I don't know a ton about it except for the title, which is very good. It's by Omar El-Akkad, and it's about Palestine and Gaza, all that, right? And but the title of the book is One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This. And like Iraq is like the ultimate example of that, right? It's like everybody somehow now was always against, the war in Iraq.
Yeah, Dick Cheney up there with Kamala Harris talking about how he was against the Iraq War.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's like a weird echo in some ways, like in 2017 when everyone, and at least like liberal side was socialist, like Buttigieg, like seeing, like everyone tried to. Harris was like, oh yeah, I would say I like medic, like they said, like everyone. There was this little moment. We were all there, I'm sure, but in our ways, but like you can see that like everyone was kind of revising their own histories to fit into like, oh, we were like socialists. And like, yeah, with this, it's like, yeah, like, I mean, I remember speaking to someone, you know, from like my parents' generation, like boomers, and like being, you know, being like, well, one of the things that radicalized, we were talking a little bit about this stuff, and it's like, why did things get so split up where like people don't understand different things or whatever, and you know, and like I talked about a little bit how like growing, you know, being a young person, young adult, like the New York Times lied us into the Iraq War so obviously, like, you know, like I could tell, but all of these, you know, everyone got into that post 9/11 imperial fervor, whatever it was, but like, but like these, you know, they're like, you know, I remember explaining that to like this person, and they were like, "What? I thought the New York Times was critical, and they were balanced." And but like, it was ridiculous. Like, I mean,
yeah,
just
right. Everybody's just totally forgotten, right? That the role of the New York Times in selling the Iraq War, which is always, by the way, right? I mean, why I always think like, you know, sort of good-hearted progressive people who want social media companies to, you know, crack down on dis or misinformation. Like, so the example I always think, I was like, man, imagine these companies that existed in 2003. Who do you think would have been accused of disinformation? People who agreed with the New York Times and the Bush administration that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, or people who were saying all those people were lying about it? Right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, that's, you know, come on. Right. But yeah, no, it's, it is remarkable, right? So like Pete Hegseth, right, who's our new Secretary of Defense, you know, was just confirmed, right, that because you know, Trump, whatever else you want to say about him, has an exquisite sense of humor. So like, you know, he figured out who like the funniest person to have, you know, be in charge of this vast imperial military would be, and you know, and he appointed him. It's like, oh, who's the guy who's always drunk on Fox News? Yeah, pick him, right? But it's like, you know, like that guy is seen as a like, you know, he's exactly the kind of like, oh, they're like these like, you know, anti-establishment populists, you know, they don't like the neocons, whatever. But it's like, I'm pretty sure Pete Hegseth in 2003, I mean, I'm the same age you are, right? It's like when the two of us were like at anti-war protests, I'm pretty sure Pete Hegseth I saw was literally doing those, like, you remember Clear Channel, you know, was doing those like rallies for America in 2003. I'm pretty sure Hegseth was literally doing the Clear Channel rallies for America.
Yeah. I mean, that time period for me was like such an interesting lesson in like, yeah, like everyone fell in the line post 9/11, you know, to where like you could have the most like ridiculous pretenses of the Iraq War, not to mention like Afghanistan or whatever that might gain, and what a quagmire. But like everyone was so in line, like every like liberal that would like you'd think would naturally like disincline from like some sort of like imperialism, or from like everyone like, oh, we should all be safe now that the airports are hell or whatever, you know what I mean? Like surveillance, like supporting surveillance states. And it's like this, all these trends still continue, I think, across those political lines where it's like, you know, liberals do want security and stuff, and they color it a little differently. But I mean, I think it was like a real, I mean, that was what really, it was a radicalizing moment for me. I mean, you know, and the way that it was covered, you know, where I felt like I was in, you know, at the time in Cleveland, and then I went to the Bay Area. But like, you know, it was like massive. There'd be like huge marches, massive amounts of people, and you'd get like no coverage. It was like, you know, all that Chomsky stuff. I don't know. It was like such a, you know, and then to come from that into the glories of the following decades, and what that's gotten us, it's kind of wild. But
yeah, you know. I mean, it's and I mean, everybody felt like, I mean, you kind of mentioned the contrast with Afghanistan, and I mean, that's really a sign of how much everybody fell into line, because like as late as like, okay, 2008, one of the main reasons that Hillary Clinton didn't win the Democratic nomination that year was because she'd supported the war in Iraq, and Obama got credit for, like, you know,
He gave a good speech as a state
Yeah.
senator or whatever it was.
He gave a speech as a state senator opposing the war in Iraq, right?
Right.
Now, I've read that speech, and in it, his argument against the war in Iraq is not like, I don't know, like American imperialism is monstrous, right? Like he doesn't, he does not pull out, Chomsky, like.
It would have been great to hear him just be like, "Let me be clear, America is bad."
Like, if you're waiting for the part where he waves around the Chomsky book like Hugo Chavez at the UN, right? It's like that doesn't happen in that speech. What he says is that Iraq was a dumb war, and that by doing it, we were like wasting resources and attention that should be spent on the right war, which was Afghanistan. Right? That was his argument, right? So it's like that was as late as 2008. That's what you were getting credit for, saying like, oh, we should just be like doubling down on our like endless bloody quagmire in Afghanistan, where we spent 20 years like drone bombing wedding parties, and but it was all worth it, right? Because in the end we had this 20-year transition from the Taliban to the Taliban, right? That's like
absolutely mind-boggling, baffling. I mean, part of me was like, like Afghanistan is like linked with like the sort of end of the Soviet Union, and I was like, oh, maybe this one will like be the quagmire, but it's a pretty resilient little crap heap. We'll see how far it goes, but it's like, dang, the American empire has not fallen due to our own follies. Shoot, maybe next time.
Not yet. Not yet. You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive postgames on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.